2627, number 4. There's your equation. And if I go to the calculator, you can see I've already typed it in. More than one term on top, more than one term on the bottom. So you have to put parentheses around the top and the bottom before you divide them. And again, there's the graph. Upper left-hand corner, bottom right-hand corner is how I describe it. And then there's an S-shaped curve through the middle. So hopefully when we're done looking at the asymptotes and intercepts, you'll understand why it is doing that. So let's go ahead and start looking at the graph. If I take the denominator, x squared minus 9, I set it equal to 0. This is the vertical asymptote. I'm looking for the vertical asymptote. So this quadratic, you may solve it in different ways. So I'm just going to, in this case, factor it. Factors into x minus 3x plus 3 for mine. And that tells me that 3 and negative 3 are values that I should not be using. And if I look at the top, you might want to factor that just to make sure. So there's an x and an x minus 9. Does not match either of those. So I don't have a hole in my graph. I have vertical asymptotes. So 1, 2, 3 to the left. 1, 2, 3 to the right. So you're starting to see why we have these compartments and we have different shapes on our graphs. Then I'm going to look for the horizontal asymptote, and that's doing the largest exponent on top and the largest exponent on the bottom. So I have a second degree on top, second degree on the bottom. Because they're the same, then I do y equals the leading coefficient, LC over LC, I call it. So the leading coefficient rule. And the leading coefficient is, there should be ones. You don't have to write the ones in front, but they're there. So it's 1 over 1, which is simply 1. So then I have this horizontal asymptote at y equals 1. Then the next step would be to find your intercepts. And I like to start with the y-intercept, easiest to find, I think, because that's when x is 0. So if you put a 0 in for the x's, you're left with 0 over negative 9. And 0 over negative 9 is simply 0. So I have a 0, 0 intercept for the y-intercept. Well, technically that's also an x-intercept, and you'll see that pop up again. So if I do the x-intercept, what makes the top equal to 0 without making the bottom 0? So since I've already factored out the x, I'm going to write that one down. So x minus 9. And if I set each one equal to 0, x is 0. And then add 9 to both sides, I get x is 9. So it looks like these are the two x values. If I plug them in, it makes the top 0. Now, if I put 0 in here, I'm left with negative 9. So that didn't make the bottom 0. So that's why it makes the top 0 without making the bottom 0. And if I put a 9 in, I get 81 minus 9. So that does not make the bottom 0 either. So my x-intercepts are 0, 0, which is already graphed for us, and 9, 0. So there's going to be one out here at 9, 0. So we had 0, 0, which was the same as that one. All right. So then when we looked at the graph, we knew we had one in the top left corner. The bottom right corner hits 9, 0 there. And that S that cut through here. So remember, in the lecture I talked about, you may have had a teacher that said you can't ever touch the asymptotes of a graph. They probably weren't exactly right. You can't touch the vertical asymptotes, but you could cross over a horizontal, so that's why we're touching that there. All right, so now you should answer all your questions. Find any vertical asymptotes. We had 2 of them, so you should type in negative 3 and 3. Well, for mine, I would do that. And then it says horizontal asymptote, type in just the 1.